I just lost my best contributing guy. The overarching culture of the business radiates from people. People look around and they go, I don't know what it is about this place.
There was this correlation between retaining customers and retaining technicians. They don't think, hey, I couldn't do that to prove. Hey, I couldn't do that to John, my tech. Their work matters. You have to push and the other is you're going to push them and they're never going to leave. You have to push them.
You're listening to the Bug Bucks Podcast, hosted by Allan Draper and Eric Bassett.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Bug Bucks Podcast. I'm Allan Draper. Have Eric Bassett here with me. What's going on, Eric?
Hey, Allan. Not too much. Just another day in the bug world. So glad to be here as always.
It's a great world to be in, man. It's a great world to be in. So we're doing back-to-back recordings today. So we just finished our episode about the profit and loss statement as a percentage of gross revenue. If you haven't listened to that episode, I'm not exactly sure what number it is just yet. Make sure that you look that up on the Bug Bucks homepage on the platform you listen to this podcast on, and take a listen to that. Very valuable for helping you get to the next level with your pest control company financially and in other ways also. So great episode. We have a good episode that we're going to record right now too. Something that's very important. And Eric, we're going to be talking about how to retain technicians. And I was telling a technician, I had a great conversation with a technician that is here in the Arizona area. And he came over to my house and we discussed him taking on this new program that he's actually helping develop from the ground up. And he's, best of the best of our technicians. He's bright future in front of him. And I shared this story with him that 4 or 5, maybe 6 years ago, I realized that there was this correlation between retaining customers and retaining technicians. And so I realized, okay, there are a bunch of things involved with retaining customers. You can't oversimplify it, but a really big piece is retaining top level technicians. And so then I decided to focus my efforts not on retaining customers so much, but on retaining technicians. And I dug down into the data. I read some research about retaining high quality individuals in different industries and different roles. And I realized, so my knee-jerk reaction was, okay, I'm going to retain technicians by paying them more. And I realized it's a necessary but insufficient part of the equation. You have to pay them what they're worth for sure. I'm not going to, disagree with that. You do. It's just not the thing that's most important to people. The number one element, the number one motivation for people in a workplace is working together. And I'd probably throw in there with people that they enjoy, right? Working together with others to achieve a common goal that they believe in, especially with this younger generation, right? These younger techs that are coming up that are in their 20s, maybe some even in their early 30s. They're motivated. They want to feel like they're accomplishing something, that they're working, their work matters. And then I think the second element, so I think that's number one. The second element is this idea of personal and professional progress. And I think money comes third. From what I've discovered and from what I've read and researched, I think that's the third most important thing in retaining people. And that's kind of where this idea of having a discussion about retaining techs came from.
Yeah. And, we've talked about, best practices with employees and hiring and retaining employees in some previous episodes. And I like that we're hitting on this idea that money isn't always the biggest contributing factor. In fact, like you said, it's sometimes number 2, number 3. And some PCOs that are listening right now might think, well, yeah, maybe not for you, but if you've had to see what I've had to spend and what I've had to do with tech wages, in the last year or two, you might think differently. But, there is a level. There's a minimum amount that you have to be able to compensate an employee with, right? Where they need to be able to have that to live in that market, and to, have a good living, essentially. But over that line, then those other things come into play, right?
Mm-hmm.
Having a common goal, having a vision,
Mm-hmm.
feeling personally tied and committed to a purpose that can be shared with other people. And then being able to look into the future and think, I might not exactly be where I am now, but I'm really happy with where I'm going and what is in the distant future that I can aim for, right? Having that pathway to progress or pathway to progression. So I feel like it's been the same thing for my technicians.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, we give them raises on a regular basis. I mean, some years it's, 2-3 times a year, depending on what's going on. But they always seem, like, okay, thanks, thanks for the raise. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Some guys really appreciate it, tears and hugs and other things. But um, when we sit down and we talk about their future, we talk about their
Mm.
goals, their visions, and we talk about, what kind of professional experience they want to gain and how they feel like they can best take what they know and what they feel and contribute to the work that they do. The feeling in those meetings is far and beyond what we get out of just money.
Well, I think it's because job satisfaction doesn't come from how much money you make. I'm going to repeat that for the listeners in the back that are like booing right now. But even for the PCOs, your job satisfaction doesn't come from how much money you make. And one of the great benefits of being a business owner is that you can make a great living. You can change your family tree. You really can. You can change your legacy, but that's not going to bring you job satisfaction. It comes from other things. Being a business owner, the best thing about being a business owner is the growth. There is no way for personal growth to come faster than through our relationships and through being a business owner. In my opinion, going to college, are you kidding me? And I'm very, compared to average people or the average person, I'm highly educated. I have a Juris Doctorate degree, but I still would say that growth um, is really exponential when you start a business, and you have to figure out a way to pass that growth on to your people. You have to push them. A really cool thing about pushing people and pushing technicians is that there's going to be one of two reactions, varying degrees of reaction, but they're going to fall into one of two categories. One is you're going to push them right out the door, and the other is you're going to push them and they're never going to leave unless the life event happens. They move, death in the family, divorce, something like that. And the ones that you push out the door are the ones that shouldn't have been there in the first place. That's the cool thing about making people grow and making them uncomfortable by learning new things. I get this idea, this trap that we fall into, these ruts of and it's happened to me in my companies where it's like it's just the status quo. It's like you wake up, do your route, go home, have dinner, be with your family, wake up, do your, you know what I mean? And because that's the easy way, but we have to continually push our techs. Is there any ideas that you have? I have a couple in mind, things that PCOs can do to either develop programs or ways that they can help their techs grow and both personally and professionally.
One of the things that has worked really well for us is that we do weekly development or weekly coaching sessions with our employees, and they don't have to be complicated. You sit down with all of your employees at least, once a week. And if you can, delegate this through managers or other supervisors. But you sit down with them, and for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, you just say, hey, how are you? How are things? Stuff outside of work. What are you into? What are you engaging in? Right? What are you passionate about? And then you spend a few minutes talking about that. And then the next thing you talk about is, hey, so when it comes to work, what's going well for you? What do you feel like are your successes? What are your victories here? What do you feel the best about? And what do you feel the best doing? Right. And you kind of take some notes there. And then you ask them what their areas of opportunity are. Hey, what are your struggles? What are some things that you have a difficult time with that you want to improve on? Right. And then after that, you allow them the space for them to come up with their own action plan where you say, hey, so I know that you want to improve these things. What do you feel is the best way to implement some of those improvements? And how do you feel like I can best help you? And then you let them come up with their own plan, because we found that the most dedicated employees, or when they are the most dedicated to change, is when that plan comes from them. Right?
Yes.
So that was one thing that we did. And then the other thing just happened a few weeks ago. We were sitting in an executive meeting, and we're all talking about new goals for the next year. And I asked my service manager, hey, what do you guys want to focus on? What's a key metric you want to improve? What's an area of the business that you want to make better? And the response was, let me check with my team. Right? Let me go talk to my team and see how they feel about it. Let me see what goals they think they want to work on. Right? And for the same philosophy is that the best goals, or I say the goals that end up getting achieved most often, are ones that have the best ownership and the best buy-in. And that comes from organically coming from those people. Right? So coaching and development sessions weekly is a great thing. But the overarching philosophy here is asking your employees what they want to improve and what they want to make improvements in and what they value, and then letting them come up with plans that you can put a stamp of approval on, but comes from them. So it's organic.
I say quite often that one of the greatest objectives of a PCO is to align the interests of the company with the interests of the people. And it's really hard to align interests when you don't know what their interests are. And recently, along the same lines that you're talking about, we've added to our feedback protocol this question of, where do you want to be professionally in 5 years? And how does proof help you get there?
Love it.
And I just had an idea. And every year, Proof has a leadership retreat. And we're actually going next week. And we go to, it's usually a warmer place for our leaders in Boston, Colorado, Michigan. So they get a little bit out of the snow and frost for a few days during the winter. And we do a few things. We recognize them, we celebrate them, we do some training, and we do some team building stuff. And so that's next week. And I just made up my mind during this recording that I'm going to ask our branch managers about their technicians. I'm going to ask them that question. Hey, what are your technicians' interests? And, how does Proof help them achieve their professional goals in the next 5 years? And then I'm going to ask the regional managers that question about the branch managers. And I have a feeling, I don't know how many listen to this. Actually, this episode won't drop until after. So this isn't going to tip them off, but I'm interested to know. And this type of communication and the importance of this type of, reaction to people's interests and our treatment of their interests has to come from the top. Which means that I need to do a better job. I need to be talking to my leadership team about their interests, about what they're trying to accomplish. And it's not until we're able to align these interests and we're able to help them achieve what they're personally trying to do, that we're going to be able to keep them long term. It's just, things are different than they were 20, 30 years ago, 40, 50 years ago, whatever, where people felt this duty to their employer. There's no duty from the employee. The duty's from the employer now. It flipped. And in order to keep top level technicians, and therefore your customers, you have to focus on the technician and what they're trying to accomplish professionally. But here's the catch. You want to see them being promoted and taking on additional responsibilities, but then they're no longer technicians. So you're kind of like, it's a catch-22 where you're like, hey, I want to keep you as a technician, but the way I'm going to keep you as a technician is by helping you develop professionally so that you're no longer a technician. But I think the ultimate goal, therefore, is not to keep them as a technician, but to just keep them, period.
Yep. Well, and it's difficult because it's just like you said, it's like on sales teams or any other team that you have, you take some of your best players, your best producers, your guys are the most efficient in the field, all these good key attributes. And you're like, okay, well, I'm going to take you out of the field. I'm going to put you into this leadership management position, which means that I just lost my best contributing guy, right? But the trade-off there is that you are putting him in a position of influence where now your new people that are going to fill those gaps are going to be influenced by him in the ways that you have influenced him and all the things that matter. And eventually what happens is, you get a new employee comes right in the door. And yeah, he goes through training and he goes through all the procedures and protocols, but the feeling, the vibe, the overarching culture of the business, what radiates from people as they go through their day-to-day job is now on a different level because you've been able to take those guys and develop them professionally and personally. And that's where you get the type of people who look around and they go, I don't know what it is about this place, but I feel like I'm in the right place for me, and I can do anything here, kind of a thing. The more confidence you have there, the better. And I feel like, especially when, developing employees and colleagues, the more that they know that you actually care about what they want and what their desires are and where they want to go, it's exponential in the efforts that they will deliver for you and your business. Just the little extra things, the little extra steps. When you were talking about how saving technicians translates into saving customers, the difference between a customer leaving and the customer staying could easily just be that technician making an extra effort to have a few more minutes of conversation with that customer and ask them about their day or about their dog or about the backyard that they changed because he actually noticed, because he's actually the same technician that's been there for a while, right? It's all these little things that make a big difference. But in order to get an employee to engage and spend the extra effort in those little things, they have to be tied into the culture of your company. And that comes from how much you care about them personally.
That reminds me a little bit of a study that was done from, I think they did it from the perspective of medical malpractice attorneys. And I learned about this when I was practicing law. And I'm going to have to dig up the study and put a link to it in the show notes. But this group noticed this really weird hesitation from people willing to sue their family doctor. And they noticed that surgeons, anesthesiologists, these other people never got sued. Sorry, they got sued all the time. The family doctors were the ones not getting sued, and they're trying to get to the bottom of it. Family doctors were making this, huge mistakes, and they were doing all these things that, set them up for liability. And so they would identify certain cases, and then they would go to the patient. They'd say, hey, just curious, why is it? Why aren't you suing Dr. So-and-so? And they said something like, oh, I couldn't do that to him. He's our family doctor. And that translates. We're going to try to find that study for those that are interested. And the study is going to be a lot more sophisticated and elaborate than I just laid it out. But the idea is, you want to put, in terms of customer retention, you want to put yourself in, you want your technician, to put him or herself in that position, right? That in that situation where it's, hey, I couldn't do that to John, or I couldn't do that to Susan. And a lot of times, John or Susan have 600 plus customers they service every quarter. And so it's like, it may not matter as much to the technician, but the customer thinks that it does. And they couldn't do that they don't think, hey, I couldn't do that to prove. They don't think that. You don't want them to think that. You want them to think, hey, I couldn't do that to John, my tech. And the way to do that is for those extra couple minutes of conversation, like you just said. John asking about the dog, John asking how, Johnny's first day of soccer practice went or whatever. And then the way that you get the technicians to do that is you do that for them, right? You're spending that couple extra minutes with them, asking them about their life, about their kids, about what they're trying to accomplish. So if you want them to do that for your customers, which is a great way to retain them, then you do that for them. Exactly what you were just saying.
Yep, 100%. And I know that this is going to come up here probably in the next couple of months, because it always comes up every spring, where PCOs will talk about door knockers, and whether they do want to use door knockers or don't want to use door knockers, not from a marketing standpoint, but more from the point that they just hate having door knockers in their market because it's a proactive marketing approach where they're, switching over their customers. So to give you guys a little bit of insight, and I think I've talked about this before, when I was on the doors, and I'd knock on somebody's door and I'd say, hey, Eric from Natura Pest Control, who are you guys using for your pest control service? Get the conversation started. And immediately I would know how difficult that sale was going to be, depending on how they responded. So if they said, yeah, I use a pest control service, I can't really remember who it is, I'm like, in the bag, dude. This is totally in the bag. If they told me the name of the company, but they didn't mention like the technician, I was like, okay, I can battle against a company. That's not a problem.
Exactly.
Right. But as soon as they mentioned the technician by name, in fact, if they didn't even tell me the company name, but they only used the technician's name, I had to, unless I really, really wanted it, I would just cut my losses and go, because that is a very difficult thing to overcome as a door-to-door sales guy. I'm like, dude, I cannot battle against John.
No,
they're like, oh yeah, John's my technician, really nice, does a great job. I'm like, okay, here's a flyer. I'm out of here. Right.
Yeah. That reminds me, I have the best story about this. I have quite a few business partners. One of them, and I'm not going to say his name, but his parents don't use proof. His own mother, but I'm not kidding. His own mother said that she could not do that and his name's John or Joe or Jack, something. She's like, I couldn't, there's no way. And so it's been years that she's used another company, and her son owns the I think that's taken a little far, but man, it goes to show that there is that loyalty, and that's what we're all after. And we talked a little bit in the P&L episode that we just recorded about raising prices and doing it periodically. Do you think somebody like that is going to care what you price their pest control at? You've got them for life.
Oh no. Yeah. As long as you're good to them, they are a customer for life, 100%. And, at that point, they would pay 20% more just to know that they're supporting you.
I think kind of getting into, as we're wrapping up, getting into a few of the specifics that you can do to increase job satisfaction and passion for a company. There's companies that do all sorts of stuff. They'll do swag, they'll do competitions, door-to-door programs, well-run door-to-door programs. They actually have a lot to add to the service side of the business. There are some door-to-door teams where they become a family. They hang out together. I have door-to-door reps that they met at Proof, that now they've been roommates every summer for the last 5 years. And I think a lot of it, and I want to know your thoughts about this, Eric. I think a lot of it is creating this us versus them mentality. And it's not like a war mentality, but like a competition. And so with your technicians, have you ever seen like where it's, if you have different offices, you could have one office versus another with reservice rate, collection rate, whatever. Or even if you just have one office, you could do something where it's like you pair techs up. So there's, two techs on a team or however you want to do it. But I think just it mixes things up. It gives them like, it kind of aligns with this interest of working together to achieve a common goal. Like you're part of a team. It just adds something, breaks up the monotony of the work. Have you seen anything like that work for you?
Yeah. So, we actually, in kind of our organization of our service team, we have these fire teams, and they're all these groups of like 5 technicians. And so we've got like Team Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, et cetera. And whenever we do competitions, we'll kind of have different things that they'll end up competing against for the same reasons. And it's never in a way where if one team wins, the other team necessarily loses out on anything specific that would hurt them or make the service worse or anything like that. But just in a game of friendly competition, So I think that most people, especially from like a technician standpoint, the job can get a little monotonous. It's kind of the same thing every day. And so having a little bit of friendly competition in there, and we have a messaging platform that we use for communication. And whenever we use those competitions, you'll see them posting in there, like, oh yeah, this for Fire Team Alpha, this, et cetera. And so it's kind of a cool way to do it. And just like you said, door-to-door teams had a lot of that. We used to do like throwdown Thursdays, tournament Tuesdays,
Yep.
like it was always something crazy just because it helped kind of channel something fun into the day-to-day work. So yeah, I agree 100% on that one.
Yeah, mix it up for your techs, come up with programs like and there's a book out there with like cool incentives, and it's not just like, hey, here's $25. It's like, hey, this is the team that won the wrestling belt for the month or whatever, just like random stuff that it's more about pride and ownership than it is about any monetary value. And I want to end with this that's worked really well for us. So we've talked about making sure that your techs, they feel listened to, they're giving feedback, that you're helping them progress personally and professionally. We talked about that for quite a while. We've talked a little bit about trying incentive programs, competitions, creating this team atmosphere and being creative and having fun with it. That's a great idea, just company-wide culture, for the culture. And then my third point would be make sure that you are celebrating small and large wins publicly and regularly.
100%. And I one of the things I was going to add, we started doing this a little while ago. I did it with my office staff, but we talked about doing like what we call like a recognition language, right? Kind of like the 5 love languages, right? But obviously in a more professional work environment. Some guys like to be recognized publicly, like they like the words of affirmation kind of a thing where you say, hey, so-and-so did a great job. He's killing it. Like if you have any questions about this thing, go to him. He's the guy, right? Some guys like gifts. They like the gift cards and they like the cool stuff, and they want to have incentives that are things related. They want a new set of AirPods or whatever it is. Other guys actually prefer kind of quality time, whether that's quality time off a route, quality time with you, quality time with other departments or other people. So it pays to know your team, and it pays to know what they get the most from when it comes to recognition.
That reminds me of that book, the love languages or something.
Yep. 5 love languages. Yeah.
Yeah, and I that's such a great point, and I think we're wrapping it up where we started with this idea of just know your people. Know your people, find out about them. They're not going to tell you stuff that's near and dear to their heart if they don't feel comfortable. They're not going to tell you what their goals are, what their dreams are. They're not going to tell you about their family unless they feel comfortable, and they're not going to feel comfortable unless you ask about it. And it might take you 5, 6, 7, 8 times. You have to build that relationship with them. And I should clarify that by you, I mean their direct leader. And it needs to be the person that's responsible for them. In all aspects of their job, that person is responsible for them. And that includes kind of this idea of making sure that what they're looking for in a technician role, those needs are being met. And that was a great point, great way to wrap it up, Eric, that those needs might be different. And they are going to be different. So I hope this helps people retain their technicians. It's a key to retaining your customers, and it just makes life a lot easier when you have people. Some of the worst days that I've had at Proof was when I have technicians. I had 4 technicians in one office quit the same day within 30 minutes of each other. And it was, honestly, I own that. That was bad leadership on my part. And those moments stick out to me. And that was 7 years ago or something. But, as leaders, we have to get better. And I hope this episode, this discussion has helped you do that. And if you feel that there's another PCO out there, a buddy of yours, that could benefit from this, make sure to share this episode with them. And we'll catch you next time.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please show your support by subscribing and leaving us a 5-star rating. Thank you, and we'll catch you on next week's episode.